Hello, Matt Davis here with more quiz help. This one is from the review quiz for Chapter 8. The author of this text played 51 hands of poker against 8 computer-simulated opponents. The number of chips won or lost, losses shown as negatives, for each of the 51 hands was collected. A 99% confidence interval for the true mean chips per hand that the author would win or lose per hand in the long run against these computer-simulated opponents was found to be mu is an element of negative 16.460 to 25.751. So what that's saying is that the average win or loss would be somewhere between losing negative 16.46 chips per hand on the low or bad end to 25.751 on the good or positive or winning side. Suppose that the author were to play 8,888 such hands against 8 computer simulated opponents based on the left or lower interval or lower boundary of the interval. How bad could the total loss of chips be? Round your answer to the nearest whole chip and don't include the negative sign with your answer and don't include commas with your answer. All right, first, in the interest of help rather than answers, instead of 8,888 hands, we're going to do this for 7,777 hands, but exactly the same idea. All right, so they want us to do this for the left boundary, which is negative, and so that's going to be a loss, and so that's why they're talking about the total loss of chips. So again, the true mean is somewhere between negative 16.460 and 25.751. We're 99% confident of that. So worst case scenario, the true mean would be negative 16.460. So if that were true, what would that mean in terms of expected loss after 7,777 hands? All right, well, let's focus on that one number. For the negative, I'm just going to make a note that that would be a loss. And it would be 16.460. And the units on that would be chips per hand. So we're saying if the mean turned out to be that left-hand boundary, that would mean that on average we're losing 16.460 chips per hand. So then how do you convert that to a total loss from, this is actually average loss. So how do you go from average loss to total loss? We've done this a few times during the semester. If you know an average and then you know how many times you're going to experience this thing, then you can multiply those together. So you take 16.460 chips per hand. I'll write the per hand as a fraction. And then you multiply that times 7,777 hands. And you could just put that over 1 if you wanted to think of that as a fraction. And then the hands part cancel. And if you multiply it together, you just get chips. And that number of chips would be the total. So if you go to the calculator and just multiply, and it's just two numbers, so you just multiply this decimal number times this whole number. If you do that, you end up with approximately 128,009.42. And that would be total chips lost. Total chips lost after the 7,777 hands if the real mean ended up being the left-hand boundary of our interval. All right, and then in terms of what do you do for active learning, it said to round it to the nearest whole number, and then it told us make sure not to put any commas in there. So what we would put in the answer box for active learning is 128,009, getting rid of the 0.42 because they said to round to a whole number, not writing the comma because that will confuse active learning. So that's our answer for the left-hand side. Don't include the negative either. They said that in the directions. We're already calling it a loss. And so just by referring to it as a loss, that takes care of the negative. So it's not like we're ignoring it. We just converted that to a word. If the problem you're doing is asking you about like best case scenario where you're focusing on the win, then you just change it by taking that number right there and putting that number in that spot. So instead of looking at an average of 16.460, you'd look at the 25.751. And if you were doing that one, then instead of referring to it as a loss, you'd call it a win because that right-hand boundary is positive. But you're just going to end up typing in the numbers, so it's not that big of a deal. So you're just taking either the left-hand side value or the right-hand side value and multiplying it by that 7,777, or in your case, the 8,888. So I would expect that'll make that go smoother for you. So head back there, give it another try. Good luck.